Adebayo was not an ungrateful man, but ambition clouded his judgment. Born and raised in the city of Lagos, he dreamed of something beyond the dusty roads and humble quarters where he and his wife, Ife, had built a modest life. Ife was a simple woman, kind-hearted, and loved Adebayo with a quiet fierceness. Yet, in the heart of Adebayo, a seed of discontent grew. Their fortunes were thin, the weight of poverty heavy, and every day, Adebayo's heart longed for more wealth, comfort, and influence. One day, he met Kemi, Ife's childhood friend. Kemi had everything Ife did not. She lived in luxury, her family name carried weight, and her beauty was undeniable. She made him forget his humble beginnings, forget the hard-working woman who stood by him through every storm. Without fully understanding what he was doing, Adebayo began to drift towards Kemi. Slowly, the distance between him and Ife widened, like a river swollen with rain. The decision he made next would change everything. Adebayo did not leave Ife suddenly. His love for her was still real, but the allure of Kemi's lifestyle consumed him. He told himself it wasn't betrayal, just opportunity knocking at his door. Every day, as he sat in Kemi's luxurious home, sipping drinks far finer than he ever could afford, he convinced himself this was his path to greatness. Kemi, aware of her influence over Adebayo, played her part skillfully. She was always warm, inviting him to dinners, showing him the power and reach she had in the city. Soon, Adebayo began staying out late, coming home with excuses that even Ife's patience couldn't accept. One evening, when he came home to Ife, she met him at the door with her usual soft smile. He couldn't bear to look her in the eyes. "Ife," he said, the word sticking in his throat. "We need to talk." Adebayo sat Ife down on their old wooden bench, the same one they had shared countless nights gazing at the stars. This night, however, there were no stars preparing for a storm. "Ife," he began, I can't stay here anymore. I've met someone. Kemi. You remember her, don't you?" Ife nodded slowly, her face calm, but her heart trembling. "I know," she said softly, her voice steady though tears brimmed in her eyes. "I've known for a while." Adebayo was surprised. "You knew?" "I've seen the way you look at her. I saw the changes in you, but I hoped you would remember us, remember the love we built here." Adebayo's heart twisted, guilt clawing at his chest. But he pushed it away. "I can't stay in poverty, Ife. I need more. Kemi can give me a life I've always dreamed of." Ife smiled sadly. "Go, then. I only want you to be happy." Adebayo moved in with Kemi within the week. Her house was nothing like the one he had shared with Ife. Marble floors, chandeliers sparkling like diamonds, and an ocean of servants. Every corner of Kemi's mansion spoke of wealth and power. The food was rich, the parties extravagant, and Adebayo began to drown in this new life. At first, he felt free. Free from the worries of paying bills, of the endless struggles with Ife. Kemi introduced him to influential people in the city, politicians, business tycoons, and soon, he had a new circle of friends. But with every passing day, a strange emptiness began to grow in Adebayo's heart. He couldn't explain it. On the surface, everything was perfect. He had everything he had ever wanted. Yet, in the quiet moments, when he was alone in the grand house, his thoughts wandered back to Ife, the warmth of her smile, the peace of their small home. Time moved quickly in Kemi's world. The days were filled with meetings, parties, and trips to exotic locations. Adebayo's face was always plastered with a wide smile, but deep down, a gnawing regret had started to sprout. He told no one about this feeling, not Kemi, not his new friends. But it was there, growing like an untended weed. It began with small things. The way Kemi laughed at the struggles of the less fortunate, the way she dismissed her staff without a second glance. Adebayo had once found these qualities alluring, a mark of strength. Now, they grated on him. One night, as Adebayo lay on the satin sheet of Kemi's bed, he thought of Ife. He hadn't seen her in months, hadn't spoken to her. Did she move on? Was she happy? The guilt that had once been a quiet whisper now shouted in his mind. One evening, Adebayo found a letter slipped under the door of Kemi's mansion. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet something about it called to him. He hesitated for a moment before opening it. The letter was brief, written with careful strokes. You have forgotten what truly matters. Return before it is too late. There was no signature, no name, just those cryptic words. Adebayo frowned. Who had sent it? How had they found him? His mind raced, but the truth was clear in his heart. He knew what the letter meant. But pride held him back. How could he return to Ife now? He had made his choice. Shaking off the unease, Adebayo crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fire. Yet, as he watched it burn, a strange sensation settled in his chest, an unsettling feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, he had made the wrong choice. Meanwhile, Ife remained in the city, her heart aching but her spirit unbroken. The community around her watched with curious eyes as rumors of Adebayo's new life with Kemi spread. Many pitied her, but Ife refused to be the subject of their sympathy. She continued her work, selling goods at the local market, her head held high. Though she missed Adebayo terribly, Ife had always been strong. She found solace in the small things, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the quiet moments of reflection under the baobab tree near her home. Every night, she whispered a prayer for Adebayo, not for his return, but for his happiness. Ife knew that life was unpredictable. She understood that people change, sometimes in ways that lead them down different paths. What she didn't know was how much her own path was about to change. One sunny afternoon, as Ife made her way through the crowded marketplace, she bumped into an older man. He was dressed simply, yet there was something striking about him, an air of wisdom. His eyes were deep, like they held secrets of the world, and he smiled kindly at Ife as she apologized for the collision. No need to apologize, my dear, he said warmly. I was just admiring the strength in your walk. Ife laughed softly, brushing off the compliment. Strength. I'm just a market woman trying to make ends meet. The man nodded, but his eyes never left hers. Strength is not just in wealth or power. You possess something far more valuable. Before she could respond, the man disappeared into the bustling crowd. Ife stood there for a moment, puzzled by his words. But she shrugged it off and continued with her day, not knowing that their brief encounter was the beginning of something extraordinary. As Adebayo continued his life with Kemi, cracks began to show in their relationship. The charm that had once drawn him to her started to fade, replaced by an unsettling coldness. Kemi was possessive, her once warm smiles now sharp with control. She began to demand more of him, dictating his actions, his friends, even his thoughts. Adebayo realized too late that he was no longer his own man. He had traded one form of poverty for another, material wealth for emotional shackles. He began to feel suffocated, trapped in a golden cage. His thoughts returned to Ife more frequently now. The peace he had shared with her seemed like a distant dream, something he had foolishly thrown away. One night, during a lavish dinner party at Kemi's home, Adebayo watched her laugh with their wealthy guests. For the first time, he saw her for who she truly was, cold, calculating, and utterly indifferent to anyone but herself. The next morning, Adebayo woke up with a heavy heart. He could no longer ignore the regret that gnawed at him. He had chosen this life, but it no longer felt like it was his. The house, the cars, the luxurious clothes, none of it could fill the void that had grown inside him. He found himself wandering the city streets, not knowing where he was going. The air was thick with the sounds of traffic, the distant chatter of vendors, and the hum of city life. It reminded him of the simpler times he had shared with Ife. His feet led him to a familiar path, one he hadn't walked in months, the road to the market where Ife sold her goods. As he approached the bustling stalls, Adebayo's heart raced. He wasn't sure if he could face her after all this time. But something deeper, something primal, pushed him forward. He had to see her, if only from a distance. Adebayo stood at the edge of the market, watching Ife from afar. She was standing at her stall, smiling and chatting with her customers as if nothing had changed. Her face was as radiant as he remembered, but there was something different about her, a quiet strength, a resilience that had grown in his absence. He watched her for what felt like hours, his heart heavy with regret. How could he have left her? How could he have traded this peace for a life of empty luxury? He wanted to approach her, to beg for forgiveness, but he couldn't find the courage. So he stood there, frozen in place, torn between his desire to return and the shame of his betrayal. Just as he was about to turn and walk away, Ife looked up, her eyes meeting his from across the crowd. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world around them seemed to fade, and all that remained was the weight of their shared history. Ife's eyes widened when she saw Adebayo standing across the marketplace. Her heart leaped in her chest, but she kept her composure. It had been months since he left her for Kemi, and though she had learned to live without him, seeing him again brought back a flood of emotions. Slowly, Adebayo approached, his steps hesitant. When he finally reached her store, the silence between them was thick with unspoken words. Ife looked at him calmly, her expression unreadable. "Ife," Adebayo whispered, his voice filled with regret. I don't know where to begin." Ife continued to look at him, her gaze unwavering. "You left," she said simply, her voice soft but firm. "You made your choice." Adebayo nodded, his eyes dropping to the ground. "I was wrong, Ife. I thought wealth would make me happy, but I was a fool. I see that now." The weight of his words hung in the air, and for a moment Ife said nothing. Then, with a sigh, she turned back to her work, leaving Adebayo standing there, unsure of what to do next. As Adebayo stood there, lost in his thoughts, the old man he had seen in the marketplace weeks earlier appeared beside him. The man smiled kindly, his eyes twinkling with a strange understanding. "Young man," the old man said, "it is not too late to mend what is broken. But you must be willing to face the consequences of your actions." Adebayo frowned, confused by the man's sudden appearance. "Who are you?" he asked. The old man chuckled softly. "I am simply a messenger, here to remind you that the heart can heal if you give it time and patience." Before Adebayo could respond, the old man disappeared into the crowd, leaving Adebayo standing alone once again. His words echoed in Adebayo's mind, and for the first time in months, Adebayo felt a glimmer of hope. Back at Kemi's mansion, the atmosphere had grown tense. Kemi had noticed Adebayo's growing distance, and her patience was wearing thin. She was not the type of woman to be ignored, and she certainly wouldn't allow Adebayo to slip away so easily. When Adebayo returned that evening, Kemi was waiting for him. Her eyes were cold, her smile sharp. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I was just out," Adebayo replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. Kemi narrowed her eyes, sensing the shift in him. "Out? With whom?" Adebayo hesitated, and in that moment, Kemi knew. Her expression darkened, and she stepped closer to him. "You were with her, weren't you?" "Ife." Adebayo didn't respond, but his silence was answer enough. Kemi's face twisted with anger, and she slapped him hard across the face. "You ungrateful fool," she hissed. "After everything I've given you, you dare to go back to her." Adebayo clenched his jaw, his cheek stinging from the slap. But instead of anger, all he felt was a deep sense of clarity. He had made a mistake, and it was time to fix it. The slap had shaken Adebayo to his core, but it also brought him clarity. He had allowed himself to be seduced by wealth and power, but none of it mattered without love, without the peace he had once known with Ife. Kemi was furious, but her rage only strengthened his resolve. That night, Adebayo made his decision. He packed his belongings quietly, determined to leave Kemi's mansion for good. As he gathered his things, he thought about Ife and how much he had hurt her. He knew it wouldn't be easy to win her back, but he had to try. He couldn't live with the regret of letting her slip away. Before he left, he paused at the door of Kemi's grand bedroom. She was asleep, her face serene in the dim light. For a brief moment, he felt a pang of guilt. But he knew that his life with Kemi had been built on false promises and illusions. With one last glance at the life he was leaving behind, Adebayo stepped out of the mansion and into the night, ready to face the consequences of his choices. Adebayo walked through the quiet streets of Lagos, his heart heavy with the weight of his decisions. The city that had once felt so vibrant and full of possibility now seemed distant, cold. He had chased after a life that was never truly his, and in doing so, he had lost the one thing that mattered most, his love for Ife. As he made his way back to the part of the city where Ife lived, memories flooded his mind. He remembered the nights they had spent talking about their dreams, the quiet moments they had shared under the stars. He had taken all of it for granted, thinking that wealth would fill the void in his heart. But now he knew better. The journey to Ife's house seemed longer than ever, each step filled with uncertainty. Would she forgive him? Could she? Adebayo wasn't sure, but he knew that he had to try. When Adebayo finally reached Ife's home, he stood outside for a long moment, gathering his courage. The small house was just as he remembered it, simple, but filled with warmth and love. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. To his surprise, it was not Ife who opened the door, but a young boy. The child looked up at him with wide eyes, and for a moment, Adebayo was taken aback. Is Ife here? Adebayo asked softly. The boy nodded and ran inside, calling out to her. Moments later, Ife appeared at the door, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Adebayo standing there. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him with a mixture of shock and confusion. Ife, Adebayo began, his voice shaking slightly. I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I've come to make things right. Ife's expression softened slightly, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I don't expect you to forgive me, Adebayo said, his eyes pleading. But I had to come back. I had to try. Ife looked at Adebayo for a long time, her heart torn between the love she once had for him and the pain of his betrayal. She had waited for this moment for months, and now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to do. You hurt me, Adebayo, Ife said quietly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. You left me for someone else, someone you thought could give you more than I ever could. Adebayo's heart sank at her words. He had known this would be difficult, but hearing the pain in her voice made it all the more real. I know, he whispered. I was a fool. I thought wealth would make me happy, but it only made me empty. I lost myself, and I lost you. Ife studied him for a moment, her gaze searching his face for sincerity. She had always been able to read him, to see through his defenses. And now, she saw the truth in his eyes, the regret, the shame, the longing for redemption. I don't know if I can trust you again, Ife admitted. But I believe that people can change, and I believe in second chances. Adebayo's heart leaped at Ife's words. He had not expected her to forgive him so easily, and though he knew there was still a long road ahead, the possibility of redemption filled him with hope. I'll earn your trust again, Ife, Adebayo promised. I'll do whatever it takes. Ife smiled faintly, her eyes softening. It won't be easy, Adebayo. You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be the same. I know, Adebayo replied. But I'm willing to do the work. I want to be the man you deserve. For the first time in months, Ife felt a flicker of hope. She had missed Adebayo more than she had ever let herself admit, and though the pain of his betrayal still lingered, she couldn't deny the love she still had for him. Let's take things slow, Ife said, her voice gentle but firm. We'll see where this goes. Adebayo nodded, grateful for the chance she was giving him. He knew that rebuilding their relationship would take time, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path. News of Adebayo's return to Ife spread quickly through the community. Some people were shocked, others curious. Whispers filled the market and the streets as people wondered why Adebayo had come back after leaving Ife for Kemi. Many assumed it was because Kemi had thrown him out, but the truth was far more complicated. Kemi, meanwhile, was furious. She had built her entire life on control, and losing Adebayo was not part of her plan. She had always been the type to get what she wanted, and Adebayo's return to Ife felt like a personal betrayal. She began spreading rumors, trying to tarnish Adebayo's name in the hopes of turning the community against him. But Ife stood by Adebayo, defending him against the rumors. People change, she said calmly whenever someone questioned her decision to take him back. And everyone deserves a second chance. Her unwavering support surprised many, but it also began to soften the hearts of those around her. Slowly, the whispers faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance of the new beginning Adebayo and Ife were trying to build together. Kemi, however, was not willing to let Adebayo go so easily. She was used to getting what she wanted, and the idea of losing him to Ife enraged her. Determined to win him back, she devised a plan to lure him away from Ife once more. One afternoon, Kemi approached Adebayo while he was out running errands. She was dressed impeccably, her beauty as captivating as ever. Adebayo, she called out, her voice sweet and enticing. I think we need to talk. Adebayo turned to face her, his heart heavy with the memories of their time together. But he stood firm, knowing that he couldn't allow himself to be swayed by her again. There's nothing to talk about, Kemi, he said calmly. I've made my decision. Kemi's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. You think Ife can give you what I can't? You're making a mistake, Adebayo. You'll regret this. Adebayo shook his head. The only mistake I made was leaving Ife in the first place. I won't make that mistake again. Kemi glared at him, her face twisting with anger. But Adebayo stood his ground, and for the first time, Kemi realized that she had lost. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Adebayo standing there, more determined than ever to rebuild his life with Ife. Over the next few weeks, Adebayo worked hard to prove his love and commitment to Ife. He helped her with the market stall, spent time with her family, and did everything he could to show that he was a changed man. Slowly, the walls that had formed between them began to crumble, and they started to rebuild their relationship. But the journey was not without its challenges. There were still moments of doubt, moments where Ife wondered if Adebayo would leave her again. But each time, Adebayo reassured her, reminding her that he had learned from his mistakes. One evening, as they sat together under the baobab tree, Ife turned to Adebayo and said, I forgive you. Adebayo's heart swelled with emotion. He had waited for those words for so long, and hearing them felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Thank you, Ife, he whispered. I'll never take your forgiveness for granted. In that moment, they both realized that forgiveness was not just about the past, but about the future they were building together. And for the first time in a long time, they felt a sense of peace. As the days turned into weeks, Adebayo and Ife found themselves growing closer than ever before. The city that had once felt so overwhelming and cold now seemed full of promise. Together, they navigated the challenges of city life, supporting each other every step of the way. Adebayo began to take an active role in the community, helping others who had faced similar struggles. He shared his story openly, admitting his mistakes and encouraging others to value love and family above all else. His honesty and humility won him the respect of those around him, and soon, people began to look up to him as a leader. Ife, too, found her own path to success. Her market stall flourished, and she became known for her kindness and generosity. Together, they built a life that was not defined by wealth or status, but by love, trust, and mutual respect. And though the city continued to buzz with its usual chaos and noise, Adebayo and Ife found a quiet peace within their own hearts, grateful for the second chance they had been given. One afternoon, while Adebayo was walking through the market, he saw the old man who had spoken to him months ago. The man was sitting quietly on a bench, watching the world go by with a serene smile on his face. Adebayo approached him, feeling a sense of gratitude for the advice the man had given him all those months ago. "Thank you," Adebayo said softly. "Your words helped me more than you know." The old man smiled and nodded. "The heart knows what it needs, my boy. You just needed to listen to it." Adebayo chuckled softly. "I was stubborn. It took me a while to understand." The old man's eyes twinkled with wisdom. "Life is a journey, Adebayo. We all make mistakes along the way. What matters is that you found your way back." Adebayo nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over him. The old man's words had guided him when he needed them most, and now, standing here with a heart full of love and gratitude, Adebayo realized just how far he had come. As time passed, Adebayo and Ife's relationship continued to grow stronger. The community, once skeptical of their reunion, now celebrated their love. Friends and family gathered around them, offering their support and encouragement as they rebuilt their lives together. One evening, Ife's family organized a small gathering to celebrate the couple's renewed bond. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of delicious food as everyone came together to honor the couple's journey. Adebayo looked around at the faces of those who had supported them through the difficult times, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He took Ife's hand in his, squeezing it gently as they watched their loved ones dance and sing around them. "This is what matters," Adebayo whispered to Ife, his voice filled with emotion. "Not wealth, not power. This, our love, our family, is what makes life worth living." Ife smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I couldn't agree more." Though Adebayo and Ife had come a long way in their journey of reconciliation, there were still challenges to face. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild, and there were moments when old wounds resurfaced, causing tension between them. One evening, as they sat together after a long day at the market, Ife brought up a painful memory. "Do you ever think about Kemi?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with doubt. Adebayo looked at her, his heart heavy with regret. "I don't," he said honestly. "She's a part of my past, and I've left that behind. You're my future, Ife. You're the one I want to build my life with." Ife nodded, though a flicker of doubt still lingered in her eyes. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if things will ever go back to the way they were." Adebayo took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "Ife, I can't change what happened, but I can promise you this: I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We may not be able to go back to the way things were, but we can build something even stronger." Over time, Adebayo's unwavering commitment to Ife began to melt away her doubts. She saw how hard he worked to show her that he was a changed man, and slowly but surely, the trust between them began to rebuild. One afternoon, as they walked through the market together, Ife turned to Adebayo and said, "I believe you." Adebayo looked at her, surprised by her sudden declaration. "What do you mean?" Ife smiled, her eyes softening. I believe that you've changed. I believe that you're here for me, for us. Adebayo's heart swelled with emotion. Thank you, he whispered. That means more to me than you'll ever know. From that day forward, the bond between them grew even stronger. They faced each challenge together, knowing that their love and trust would carry them through. As the months passed, Adebayo and Ife built a life filled with love, trust, and mutual respect. They continued to support each other in their work and in their community, becoming pillars of strength for those around them. Their love story, once filled with betrayal and heartache, had transformed into one of redemption and hope. Together, they faced the future with open hearts, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would always have each other. And as they stood together under the baobab tree one evening, watching the sun set over the city, Adebayo took Ife's hand in his and smiled. We've come a long way, he said softly. Ife nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. And we have a long way to go. But as long as we're together, we'll be just fine. The end.
you.